I'm going to do a little workshop called Who's My Brother? And this is a scenario I want you to imagine. It's tomorrow. I'm Pastor David. He's just done his normal, hi, I'm Pastor David spiel, and he asks if there are any visitors. And two people stand up and say, hi, we're from London, I'm Pat, and this is Sam, my brother. Now, when you hear them say, we're from London, I'm Pat, and this is Sam, my brother, what do you understand by brother here? How are they related?
Same mother and father.
Sorry? Same mother and father?
Yeah.
Okay, so they share same parents. What else do you understand?
Same surname?
Yeah.
Same surname, yes.
Possibly they grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe not.
Okay.
Judging by the names, they probably are Asians
Probably Caucasian, okay.
and not from India or
No.
one of the other colonies.
Both speak English.
Yeah. Well, he certainly spoke English here. Now, Pat says, this is Sam, my brother. So what sex is Sam?
Yeah, probably male.
Male. We hope in this day and age, we don't know, but yes, no, he's probably male. Okay, I'll move on. So yes, so we can, Sam is male. Pat and Sam have the same parents. What about the age? Do we know anything about their age? Which one of them is older or younger?
No. There will be an age difference, unless they're twins.
Unless they're twins, of course. Sam could be older or he could be younger. And even if they're twins, one of them came first. It might be a few minutes, but yes.
But it is possible though, like if in my perspective, right, I'm putting my hat on, because Pat is introducing Sam, that's probably the older one speaking and introducing the younger one.
Yeah.
So like in my mind, I'm thinking generally the older one would speak and introduce the younger, unless the younger one was more popular, more outgoing, introducing the older one.
That's a very good, interesting aspect there. Who does the introducing and why? Does that imply that actually Pat is the older one?
That could also be females, though.
That could be a female.
Yeah, actually we don't know.
Yeah.
Pat could be female.
Yeah.
So, but
Sam
we.
could be female.
Well, we'd probably have a good idea if we saw Pat. But probably.
So we don't know the sex of Pat, but we can definitely assume that Sam is male.
Well, not
Her brother then.
in the modern, nowadays Sam is Samantha, so depending on what
It
they,
says my brother.
oh yes, okay, sorry, yeah.
I also got that one.
Okay, what's happening? Okay, same Pat and Sam, but this time when Pastor David asks, is there any visitors? He says, hi, this is Pat speaking again. We speak Mbeleme and come from Benin. I'm Pat and this is Sam Mano. Okay, so the question is same thing. When you hear him saying, this is Sam Mano, what do you understand? What's the relationship between them?
No idea. Don't speak in Bellamy.
I'm sure you're going to tell us. Hopefully.
Most likely a human being, and not maybe Sam the dog.
Yeah. Sam is a human being. We can certainly extrapolate that.
Yes. Could be his dog.
So for you, that's totally meaningless. You don't know what it means. I'll give you a clue. It is a word for sibling. But at the moment, you're not in a position to know what that means at all. You don't know, you don't know, are they male, female, anything like this. So I'll help clue you in on this one. Okay, umano. So in Mbeleme, what umano means is that it's a sibling who's the same sex. So Sam is the same sex as Pat. Okay? It also means that Sam is older than Pat.
Interesting.
So what does this mean? Having said that, if Sam is the same sex as Pat, does that tell us if they're male or female? Hmm?
No.
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 So they could be, Sam could be female, and that would mean that Pat is also female.
Yeah.
And Sam could be male, and that means that Pat is also male. And in this instance, Sam is older than Pat. Who's doing the introducing? Pat. So in this instance, you've actually got the younger sibling doing the introducing, but that's just maybe, as you say, Pat's more outgoing. Now you're getting a little bit of a clue now. You've got the first word there. Next scenario. Hi, I'm Pat and this is Sam. Nanke. So what do you think Nanke could mean?
Friend.
Friend. Okay, so we're still talking about terminology for siblings. You've had mano, which meant same sex and older. Any idea what this could mean?
It could be the opposite sex, or it could be this is the same sex but younger.
Aha, okay. I think Lisa's getting a bit clued in here. So in this instance, Kananke. Okay, Sam is the same sex as Pat. And in this instance, Sam is younger than Pat. Okay. Now I think you're getting, Lisa's already.
Yeah, I got the pattern here.
Hi, I'm Pat and this is Sam Nta. What do you think Nta could mean in this instance?
Different sex.
Okay.
And older. Or the same age.
Or-
I mean, what are all the options that we should? Very involved.
To try and turn the page here.
The point we get is that there's a lot more possibilities.
Yeah,
Describing relationships.
Yeah.
indeed.
Family relationships.
So in this instance,
Opposite.
Sam is the opposite sex to Pat. Sam could be older or younger than Pat.
I don't know.
You don't know in this instance. So basically, in Mbeleme, there are three kinship terms for siblings. Mano or umano, which means this is a sibling who is the same sex and older. Kananke, which is same sex and younger. Nta, actually got them here. Opposite sex could be older or younger. So, there you go. Already there was that complication of when someone introduces themselves, you don't know necessarily, it doesn't equate with the word we have in English for brother and sister. An example where this has been a problem, or could be a problem, for Bible translation. Here we have a verse, Luke chapter 10 verse 40. Martha was upset over all the work she had to do. So she came and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to come and help me. So, would Martha, when we're translating into Mbeleme, would Martha call Mary Nmano, or Nanke, or Nta?
Not the last one.
Not the last one.
Not the last one, okay? So it's either got to be Nmano or Nanke.
Yeah. We had no idea what the age difference was between them.
Okay, so there's the challenge. We do not know for sure who's the older and who's the younger sister, and in Mbeleme we need to have that information in order to get the right relationship. So,
Interesting.
David?
So would you assume from the original language, the order, like if you understood how they did it,
in Greek that the order would be oldest comes first? Like, so it says Mary and Martha, or how do you go about figuring that out?
Yeah.
I don't know if word order, if that's important, because again, different passages, sometimes you encounter Mary first, other times you encounter Martha first. There's some cultural clues that can help us. So, I don't know, what do you know more generally about the family situation of Mary, Martha and Lazarus?
So Martha was, I would assume, if I were going to assume, I would assume that Martha was the older.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I would assume that is because she seems more responsible for the household chores. And so I would assume that the older daughter would have laid those chores on first, and Mary would have been allowed to be the dreamy one who was, thinking, but I don't know, maybe I'm all wet. Who knows? But that's what I would assume.
Yeah, and that's one of the assumptions that's drawn on. Also the fact that it seems that Martha owned the house.
That's true.
And Jesus often went and stayed there, and the fact that she took the lead in many of the activities. The general assumption is that Martha was probably the elder sister. So knowing that, if she talks about Mary now, can you remember which of the terms would she use?
First one.
No, Martha's the
Older.
second one. Yes, so Martha's the older sister.
Yeah.
She would call Mary Nanke. This is what we're assuming. But there'll always be that slight element of doubt. But that also culturally would fit in with the scenario of her taking the lead in action, her owning the house, although that isn't so predominant in where we are in West Africa, that women own houses. But people would identify with that. And there are other instances in the Bible where we have sibling relationships and it's not always apparent who's the elder and who's the younger, and that has to be discovered. Okay, another scenario. Claire is one of our research assistants, part of one of our team members back in Benin, who's doing a sterling job keeping our household running in our absence. But very early on, I think maybe even the first year we were there back in 2002, not long after she started working for us, she came one day, she said, "My father's died, can I have time off for his burial?" And of course we said, "Sure, and accept our condolences. By law, you're entitled to have time off." Several months later, Claire came to work and said, "My father's died, can I have time off for work for his burial?" Well, you can see my reaction was question mark. "But didn't we just give you time off several months ago?" "Oh yes, but this is my other father." And we're like, in the meantime, we'd also learned that her father had died when she was a young girl and that she'd grown up in a single family without a father. So we was very confused by this. So what do you think might be going on? Okay, so I don't know, did you all hear that at the back?
No, what was it?
Maybe she's talking about her father's siblings.
Okay.
Who in English I would call my uncles. So my father's brothers, in English I say, "Oh, that's my uncle."
Or godfather?
It could be a godfather as well. But in fact, that's what's going on here. So in Mbeleme, they don't have a general word for uncle, and they don't have a general word for aunt. So your father's brothers are also your fathers. Your mother's sisters are your mothers. Your father's sisters are paternal aunts. And your mother's brothers are maternal uncles. And the word for maternal uncle is literally male mother as well. So what do you think this means now in thinking of the first question of who is my brother? If I say someone's nanke or sister or my sibling, nanke nta mano. If your father's brothers are also your fathers, this means that their children are also your siblings.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this means
They
that.
might not have the same parents.
Mhm.
Same parents.
And so that means when someone comes and says nanke umano, it might mean you have the same birth parents, but it could mean that you might not have the same birth parents. And that's when they're talking and they make distinction, and they want you to know, actually this father is the father who gave birth to me, then you know that's the genitor, if you like. And this mother, she's the one who gave birth to me, then you know that's the genitor. But when someone comes and says brother or sister or nanke, ta or mano, you're never totally sure, do they share the same parent or not? And if they say this is my father, you're never totally sure unless they explicate the relationship, if it's the actual birth father or not.
So I have a question. So is it common then for people to just use the word father and not make a distinction to tell if it's the father who gave the birth, or is it the like uncle? Like, would they, in general speaking to each other, would they just use that, just the normal word father?
Yes.
So how do the people understand, or is that not important?
It's not necessarily important because the relationship you have is meant to be the same. So in terms of how they relate, all the fathers have equal status, and in fact they have to be careful that they don't favour their birth father over their classificatory fathers, or else this could be seen as inappropriate. So if they needed to explain the relationship, that's when they would say, oh, well, this is literally, they make add the word for birth in and say this is the father who gave birth to me. Just to complicate things further, you can also be born posthumously. We have Leverett system. So if a woman dies without children, she can be inherited by one of the brothers, because as she would say, well, my husband's brothers are also my husband's. So they can inherit it. That doesn't mean that there's a sexual relationship with them, but they can inherit them. And then the children she has posthumously are still considered the children of the deceased father. So in fact, we have other people who work with us. When I was doing research with them, that we had to make that distinction of, okay, this particular man was the genitor, but in fact he considers the deceased husband as his birth father. So it gets extremely complicated to know who's the father. And
Can you tell by the name? Like here, they don't carry the family name.
They would take on the birth father's name as their surname. That's what they would do. That's the normal way. But now that the government's trying to standardise surnames, they're not doing that anymore. So you can't necessarily tell by the name. So it's only if they take the time to explain. Now the other issue is now that when they're trying to explain to me in French, they'll default to French. So then they'll say, oh, this is my uncle. And then I look at them and say, when you say uncle, do you really mean your uncle, or do you mean your father? And they're like, oh, you understand our system. Oh no, here I'm talking about my father. So this gets really interesting when you start to look at some of the family trees in the Old Testament, in the Bible. Okay, I've said your father's brother's children and your mother's sister's children are also your siblings, not your cousins. So we're just going to have a quick look at Abraham's family tree. I think I've just about got time to do this.
Yes.
Sorry, the purple lines don't show very much. You've got Abraham, Sarah, Nahor and Haran. I think most people know that Abraham married Sarah, who was actually his half-sister. But this gets very interesting when you start to think in terms of Mbeleme. Is it doing anything? Okay, so based on what we've just told you, Haran has 2 children, Milcah, a daughter, and Lot, a son. So this means Haran is their birth father, but Nahor and Abraham are also Milcah and Lot's father, and in this instance Sarah is their paternal aunt. And we also know that Abraham married Sarah and also Hagar, and from them he had Ishmael and Isaac. So this also means that Haran and Nahor are also the fathers of Ishmael and Isaac. And Sarah is simultaneously the mother of Isaac and his paternal aunt. Well, I also get muddled up when I do this.
Understandable.
Mm-hmm. Now here, Nahor married Milcah. So what does that mean?
Her uncle or her father, in that sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Married the daughter then.
Okay, yes. So Milcah was both, Nahor was Ishmael, Isaac, Milcah, and Lot's father. This meant that Nahor married Milcah, his daughter.
Yeah.
They then have a child, Bethuel. So what's Milcah's relationship to Bethuel?
Sibling or daughter?
Okay.
Milcah's relationship.
Milcah's relationship with Bethuel.
She was his mother.
And siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And sibling.
Mother and sibling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was simultaneously Bethuel's mother
Yeah.
and
Sister.
his sister.
Yeah.
Bethuel then has two children, Rebekah and Laban. Isaac, Rebekah, just a minute. I'm getting.
And Leah.
Okay. So, thinking through Isaac's relationship to Rebekah and Laban, he was simultaneously on that same generation. Isaac was Rebekah and Laban's father and also maternal uncle. And then Isaac marries Rebekah. So who was he marrying?
His daughter.
His daughter and his niece. And so it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And when we started to look at this in Envelome, the team were just absolutely scandalised. They were horrified to see all this in marriage between fathers and daughters and maternal uncles and nieces. Very quick, one last anecdote, and then my time is up. My mum and her brother, that means my maternal uncle, came to visit us in Benin. And again, this was in our early days. We took them to the villages. We thought they'd be so thrilled to meet my mum and, well, my maternal uncle as well. But they went absolutely crazy over my maternal uncle. It was, oh, your mum, that's nice, but your maternal uncle has come to visit you? This is just amazing. And they treated him like royalty. And we had no idea why at that time. And then we discovered that the most important relationship, the most important person in your life is not your father, it's not your mother, it's your maternal uncle. So in fact, the maternal uncle is the most important person. And when they were going through this, they said when someone has two relationships, can be simultaneously a maternal uncle and a father, it's the maternal uncle relationship that predominates, and that marrying your niece is a little bit less offensive than marrying your daughter. So they could cope with some of these relationships, but generally, again, this created issues and raised a lot of questions of why was there so much in marriage between fathers and daughters and maternal uncles and nieces. And then we had to try and explain, God's idea of trying to keep the Israelites separate from the other people groups that were around them. Anyhow, that's just a little bit. I see that my time is up. about the whole question of who's my brother, and it's good for you to think through, especially if your first language is not English or French or German. How do you think about relationships? Do you have the same terms? And where could this cause confusion when you're introducing your siblings or someone to someone else, or if you're having to do translation?